we look at the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kinshasa, it's not just about an isolated event, but rather a culmination of tensions that have been simmering for years. U.S. Congo relations have, for a long time, been marked by debates over foreign aid and governance. And, well, those debates can sometimes be perceived locally as forms of external interference. Now, layer that with the grassroots frustrations. Economic hardship plays a major role here. Many people feel abandoned by the system, both locally and, to an extent, by international entities they think should be helping more. And this disconnect fuels narratives that misinterpret what the United States is doing in regions like the Congo. It's not to oversimplify, but it's a powder keg of miscommunication and unmet expectations. Historically, foreign embassies, particularly those of powerful nations, have, kind of acted as symbols of influence, either welcomed or resented. And in the Congo, historical grievances add another layer of complexity. This attack, for example, is not just about today. It's a continuation of that generational frustration. And when you consider how, in the past, embassies have become focal points during times of local unrest, it starts to, make more sense, doesn't it? The actions of the mob, their targeting of the embassy and setting it ablaze, carry a lot of symbolic weight. Fire, as brutal as it is often used to wipe away what's seen as oppressive or unwelcome. In this case, it's a message, hard to interpret in its rawness, but undeniably a statement on US influence in the region. And, of course, we have to think about what this means. What it means for future safety measures, for the trust or lack thereof between nations, and for how we understand these tensions moving forward. Social media, too. What a factor it's been, huh? It's playing a greater role in mobilizing protests. With events like these, platforms amplify frustrations, turning local discontent into something far-reaching. Sometimes it's organizing, other times it's framing, shaping the story to fit broader grievances about inequality, governance, or even more distant geopolitical struggles. This incident in Kinshasa is both a physical event and a symbolic one that reflects deep fault lines in the way people perceive foreign engagement. And it leaves us asking, so looking at how the United States has responded to the embassy attack, we see a very calculated, almost textbook series of actions. Immediate emergency protocols were activated naturally, ensuring the safety of embassy staff. It's standard practice, but in moments like these, the execution becomes absolutely critical. And then, of course, there were the official statements, cautiously worded, carefully framed. They strike a balance between condemning the violence and reaffirming commitment to diplomatic relations, which, is almost a diplomatic script in itself. One interesting angle here is how this response compares to past incidents involving US embassies under threat, right? You think back to incidents in other volatile regions, and there's often talk of reshaping strategies, rethinking how embassies operate in environments that can be, unpredictable. This event in Kinshasa might just push policymakers to reconsider their approach to Congo, and perhaps even regions with similar dynamics. And when we talk about Congo's government, it's clear they had to act quickly to restore order. Deploying security forces to de-escalate the situation and protect diplomatic missions was, a necessity, not a choice. But what stands out to me is the complexity of their position. On one hand, they have to maintain stability. On the other, they're navigating internal political pressures and external scrutiny. It's, a balancing act that's hard to get right. Now, something we can't ignore is the role of political factions and media. These elements are incredibly influential during crises like these. And let's be honest, sometimes they amplify anti-US sentiments for their own agendas. It's like this back and forth of narratives where the public is caught in the middle. And if you add instances of miscommunication to the mix between diplomats, local authorities, even international observers, it only complicates the situation further, doesn't it? It all ties into a greater question about governance and the power of symbolic gestures, both from the US and Congo. How will this reshape their priorities? Will resources be redirected to address these vulnerabilities? And will either side, all right, so let's dig into what this means for US Congo relations. Because the ripple effects here are profound. First off, violence against a diplomatic mission. Well, it's not just an act of aggression, it's a breach of trust, isn't it? And trust is one of those cornerstones in international relations that takes years, decades even, to build, but just moments to fracture. The immediate concern, of course, is security. Diplomatic missions rely on host governments to ensure their protection, so incidents like this can strain those frameworks. For Congo, the challenge will be showing they can maintain that security, not just for the United States, but for any foreign presence. And for the US, well, I'd say they're probably reassessing aid agreements and the broader partnership as we speak. It always comes back to stability, right? Because without it, bilateral initiatives, they crumble. But this goes beyond just the US and Congo. Look at the broader map of Africa. Whenever there's an act of hostility toward a US mission like this, it tends to trigger a reassessment of their diplomatic strategies across the entire region. It's, a signal that there are vulnerabilities, not just in one country, but potentially in others, sharing similar frustrations or power dynamics. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Is this event part of a trend? A larger decline in US influence across the continent? Or is it an isolated flashpoint, unique to Congo's history and political climate? It's easy to speculate either way, but the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, doesn't it? The US, despite its significant investments in development and security on the continent, isn't immune to the undercurrents of resentment that have been building over decades, if not centuries. And speaking of time, history really, it plays such a crucial role here. The frustrations bubbling up today, they're not new. They are deeply rooted in the public's perception of Western policies, whether it's economic interventions or political pressures. These things leave scars. What we're seeing in Kinshasa feels like a culmination of that history, manifesting in modern day anger. The moment you start connecting these dots, you begin to see how the past, the present, it's all intertwined, shaping not just reactions like the attack, but the discourse that follows. But let's not forget one thing: sentiment and narrative. Public sentiment, especially in a highly interconnected world, has the power to influence policy, sometimes more directly than we realize. And the media, it amplifies that sentiment, creating a feedback loop that can either escalate tensions or calm them, depending on how it's handled. This is where policymakers in both the US and Congo need to tread carefully. Missteps here could lead to a cascade of consequences, some that might not be containable. In the end, though, this isn't just about understanding what happened, but about asking how both nations move forward. Can the trust be rebuilt? Will there be changes in how diplomacy is conducted in the region? And what does this mean for the people caught in the middle? Often, they're the ones who feel the weight of these fractures the most, aren't they? So, as we wrap up today, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Understanding these events requires us to look deeper, not just at the actions, but at the contexts, the systems, and the histories that shape them. And on that note, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and I'll catch you next time. Stay safe out there.